I visited some friends in Austin. On my way back home to Louisiana, I received a message from Tom, an old high school friend, asking when I was leaving. He lived about an hour away from Austin, right along my route, so I decided to stop by. When I arrived, I noticed Tom's house had an old-fashioned style, but it wasn't run down. Stepping inside, the scent of aged wood and the atmosphere transported me back to the 1970s. We sat in the living room, drinking whiskey and talking about life. One glass turned into two, then three, until I was completely drunk. Tom suggested I stay the night since I was in no condition to drive, and I agreed. He showed me to a guest room. I didn't pay much attention to my surroundings because of how intoxicated I was. I only remembered the stillness in the air, as if the room hadn't been used in a long time. I quickly fell asleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up, thirsty. In the dim moonlight, I noticed a strange shape hanging on the wardrobe door. It looked like a black cloak, but something about it seemed off. I reassured myself and closed my eyes to sleep again. By morning, when I woke up, the cloak was gone. I awoke again later in the night, in complete darkness, feeling my throat dry. A faint light filtered through the curtains, but it wasn't enough to dispel the eerie silence that filled the room. I sat up slowly, feeling slightly dizzy. The room appeared unchanged, but something felt wrong. The silence was absolute. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my chest. As I moved to get out of bed for a drink of water, my gaze landed on something across the room. Near the wardrobe, a shadowy figure loomed. At first, I assumed it was just a coat I had left hanging on the door, but the longer I looked, the more uneasy I felt. That coat, it wasn't on a hook. It wasn't hanging at all. It seemed to be floating in midair. I frowned, trying to focus. Maybe I was still groggy. Maybe it was just the trick of the light. But then a shiver ran down my spine as I realized that even though the light outside flickered slightly with the wind, the dark shape remained perfectly still. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. It had to be my imagination. Maybe it was just a coat puffed up by the breeze. I turned away, determined to ignore it, and lay back down, pulling the blanket over my head. But even with my eyes closed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Time passed slowly. I lay there, listening intently. There was nothing but the steady ticking of a clock somewhere. No wind, no movement. But then, a tiny sound, a soft creak, like something shifting across the floor. I froze. Where was that sound coming from? I tried to reason with myself, perhaps just the wooden floor adjusting to the temperature. But I couldn't convince myself, because soon after I heard it again. A faint noise, like slow, deliberate footsteps. I held my breath, afraid to move. Sweat began to bead on my forehead. I knew I should turn around to check, but fear kept me still. The sensation that something stood just behind me sent chills through my body. 1 minute passed, then 2. Nothing else happened. The sound disappeared and the silence returned, but I still couldn't bring myself to move. I just lay there, waiting. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me, and I drifted into a restless sleep. When morning arrived, sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the room. I opened my eyes, feeling heavy and drained. The unease from the night before still lingered in my mind. Slowly, I turned to look at the wardrobe. There was nothing there. The floating cloak, or whatever it was, had vanished. I returned to my old family home after years of being away. The house sat deep in a quiet neighborhood where I had grown up, filled with childhood memories. Everything remained almost the same. The aged walls, the small garden in front, and the familiar wooden door with scratches I had carved into it as a child. Stepping inside, I found a thin layer of dust covering everything, and the air carried a faint, musty scent. It felt as if time had abandoned the place. I smiled slightly as memories flooded back. Family dinners, laughter echoing through the living room, and nights spent under the blankets listening to my mother tell ghost stories on rainy evenings. But The moment I stepped into the living room, an eerie sensation crept over me. A strange silence filled the space, as if the house itself was holding its breath, watching my every move. I shook my head, telling myself it was just nostalgia playing tricks on me. I walked down the hallway and stopped in front of my mother's room, a place that hadn't been visited in years. The door was slightly ajar and darkness lay beyond. I hesitated before pushing it open, and the instant I did, an icy draft rushed past me, sending a chill down my spine. The room remained unchanged, yet something felt off. A large mirror faced the bed, reflecting my image. But somehow, I had the unsettling sense that I wasn't alone in the reflection. I stood frozen, staring into the mirror. There was nothing there but my own reflection. But deep inside, I knew something unseen was watching. I turned away, forcing myself to ignore the creeping unease. But just as I stepped out, a faint sound echoed behind me, a quiet, whispering laugh. My heart stopped. I spun around, but the room was empty. A shiver ran down my spine. I hurriedly stepped out and shut the door tightly. I told myself it was just exhaustion, like that my imagination was running wild. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in that house. Descending the stairs, my mind raced. Then, just as I reached the last step, a sound from above stopped me in my tracks. A soft, deliberate footstep on the wooden floor upstairs. I froze, my pulse pounding in my ears. I wasn't alone. Without hesitation, I rushed to the front door. But when I grabbed the handle and tried to pull it open, it wouldn't budge. The door wouldn't move, as if someone or something was holding it shut from the inside. A cold gust of wind blew through the hallway, flinging open a window at the far end. In that fleeting moment, I saw something reflected in the glass, a shadowy figure standing exactly where I had just been. My heart pounded. I shut my eyes, took a deep breath, and yanked at the door again. This time it swung open, and I nearly stumbled outside. I bolted down the steps, refusing to look back. Only when I was far from the house did I finally stop, gasping for breath. Glancing back, I saw the upstairs window still open, but the figure in the reflection was gone. And yet the feeling remained, that something or someone was still watching me. From within that old house, the place I had once called home.